go ahead and I'll talk a little bit about the
coming out.
Alki, West Seattle area, the Duwamish Peninsula. My name is Marcy Johnson, and I grew up here in West Seattle from 1959 until 1973, and the Fur Lodge estate that the Bernard family built in 1904. And in the very far right of that photograph, there's a littler building off to the side and the right, is the carriage house. So it had the horses and the carriages and things like that. Well, the Bernard family had a main house in downtown Seattle. And they were commuting back and forth. And the Alki Bay is very shallow, which is why when the founding family, the Denny's and Warrens and Lowe's and landed in 1851, they stayed there for a while, but they quickly learned that the tide was, and the bay was too shallow. So they all moved over to west downtown. And they built the city there. So Alki became more of a resort.
Well, I'll move it.
And the Bernards kept their estate until about 1907, and then they sold the property off. They divided it up and sold it. And when they did that, they moved the little carriage house that you can see in that photograph up and around about a half a block. And they converted that little carriage house or barn into a home. So they put a hallway up in the upstairs and made bedrooms and put it on a foundation, and it became a home. And it was a home from about 1907 until 1994, with one exception. There was a short period of time where Rose's Antiques occupied the building. But as a business like an antique shop, it didn't do too well. So Rose relocated, and I think she still has a shop up in the junction. So other than that, there were people living in it. And my mother, when she came from Oklahoma with her mother in about 1940, they rented an apartment on Beach Drive, and then they moved to Queen Anne. But because they'd been in this beautiful area, they kept coming back for visits. And so when my mother married, I can remember, you know, once every couple of months we would come over on a Sunday and dig clams along the beach. And anytime we had company, we'd bring company to Alki area too, because it's so beautiful, so many things to do. And then one day, my mother asked my dad to slow down a little bit. And she pointed to a log cabin house and said, "How would you kids like to live there?" And we just said, "Oh, that'd be really cool. That'd be really cool." Well, they'd already bought it, and they wanted to get our reaction. So in 1959, in the spring, we moved from Beacon Hill into the log house there on 61st and Stevens. Do people know where the Statue of Liberty is on the beach? Okay, so it's one block south of that exactly. And who has been to or knows about or remembers the Homestead Restaurant? Yeah? Okay, so it's been a restaurant for many, many years. It was, when it was first sold in 1907.
Hello?
Then it was the Seattle House Club for a number of years before it became a restaurant. And then it's really been a restaurant ever since. And the first couple owned it, and then Doris Nelson and her husband bought it. And Doris had the restaurant for about 26 years. Did anybody know
The
Doris
Log
Nelson?
House
I
Museum.
knew it.
Did you?
It's on Alki.
All right, excellent. Well, her husband passed away, but she kept the restaurant going, and she prided herself in this beautiful interior. And,
Great chicken.
exactly, that's what
If
it's famous
you
for.
would know, for chicken.
Yep, exactly. And so, but she wanted to retire, so somewhere in the mid-70s, she sold it. And another group of people owned it. They changed the name, they changed some other things, and then a year or so later, they defaulted on the loan, so she actually got it back. And she decided to keep it, so, and Doris was in the restaurant every day it was open, and just really till the day she died in 2006, which was a sad day. And then it was purchased by a local businessman, who unfortunately had an electrical problem that he hadn't fixed, and it did have a fire. And you may have read about that in the West Seattle Herald or the West Seattle Blog or something. So it had a fire in 2009, and it really sat vacant and untended for too many years. Now, it had become a landmark building when the Historical Society bought the log cabin to convert it to
Well,
a
fit in
museum.
one of these?
And they worked out a deal with Doris Nelson to landmark both buildings, because they were related.
Yeah, because this is.
The main house and the log cabin, the carriage house. And parking, she made parking available as well. Are we getting anywhere, or?
No,
No. Okay.
unfortunately.
Well, I could show the photos on my laptop.
But I don't have an HDMI cable.
I mean, just on my laptop. It's small, and if we raised it up, I suppose we could try that.
We could. Yeah, because if this is not working.
Okay.
I apologize.
Well, me as well. I might should have come a few days ago and tried it out.
Well, no, we should have had it up and running
Well,
and
okay.
figured it out.
both
So
ways.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to try one more time.
Okay.
Where's the, that goes in here. Okay, so.
So I told him the other day, I said.
Yeah, why are you destroying it?
That's on.
Burnt the kitchen.
It did, but we actually went inside the building and it was not that damaged.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the flames went
I-
pretty much
I don't
straight
have
up.
a
There was a lot of
result
smoke
for that. All
damage. The flames pretty much went
And here
straight
we're
up
good.
alongside
It's not
the
coming up on the
fireplace.
TV.
Okay.
That one
And
there.
it did go through the
Also,
second
we're gonna
story
have
and
to
the
plug it
roof.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah,
But it's a landmark building, it was, you know, eligible to be repaired, and finally, there was a buyer, Dennis
Yeah.
Sheldon, who purchased the building and with the intent of restoration, which is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. If you have an opportunity to dine or even just go in the bar and have your drinks sometime, it's really worth the trip to go there.
This is the HDMI cable.
Let me see your laptop.
Well, it doesn't have the fried chicken dinners anymore because the Eastons
It's just beautiful.
had a little restaurant down by
Can you
Pioneer
do me a
Square,
favor?
they still
You
have it,
wanna just
Yeah.
like
called
that?
El Cuervo, which means the crow.
Okay, where
And
is your-
it serves lunch only, Monday through Friday, but I understand the line is out around the block in order to get to their delicious Italian food. So they opened the restaurant in the homestead, and it's renamed Il Nido, which means the nest. So the big one is the nest, and they'll serve dinner only. 195. Yeah. Anyway, we did manage to get a reservation. They're not easy to get because it's kind of a hot new deal. But you can get on resi.com, RESY.com, and set an alert actually. And then they'll flash you on your phone on an alert that says, oh, can you come tonight? And you'll say yes or no. And if you don't see that in time, somebody else has got it. So,
I asked the bar, yeah.
I gotta go back.
Enjoy the bar anytime now.
I think so. I'm guessing so, yeah.
Good morning.
And, anyway, we did manage to go, and it's a little on my end, but it was absolutely delicious. And again, for real special occasions, I'd say you can go.
Cheryl, can
Yes,
you
somebody
see
got
if
it
you
to
get the
work.
maintenance guy,
Wow, awesome.
Berto, to come back to
Yeah.
see? Oh, we might have it.
We just needed the HDMI.
No, we got the HDMI. Yeah. All right.
Can you hand me the laptop or is it
Will that work?
attached?
It's attached.
Okay.
This
Here,
time we're
let me
fine.
pull it out this way to give you a little bit more. Oh, yeah, this is as far as it's gonna get. I am so sorry.
Well, it reminds me that I really need to get a cable.
Very recent.
No. It's not good. Oh, that's the best thing to do. Can I do that?
Yes, you should be able to.
Because that'll be the easiest way to
Oh,
do
I'm
it.
sorry, I did that.
No, no, no.
It might be on the other side too. You might-
No, it's not. It's on this side, but I may have it upside down.
There you go. All right. We got it going. Thank you, everybody, for being so patient.
Would you prefer to have the lights off or on?
You guys want them off or on?
Can you leave it on for just a minute?
Yeah, yes. Oops. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, here we go. All right. Well, I think, would you mind sitting here and
No.
doing that? You just put the arrow? No, just these arrows right here.
What's watch that?
Okay. I'm an unbalanced woman.
We're gonna watch this presentation. What is it? It's about a log house.
You can make it full screen.
Right here, I'll go get a chair. Wait, your mom's coming. Yeah, I'll come right back. Go ahead and sit right here.
I think it's up above.
It's not full screen.
I have to go to the bathroom. Okay, come on. I don't know. Come on, take care. Can you save Marcy? Yep, that'll be safe. Just follow me. Thank you. You're welcome.
Oh, it's good. Okay. Yeah. All right, just a minute, I gotta get my body prepped again. Okay, can everybody see?
Yes. Lights. Camera.
Oh, what, your lights off? Okay.
Oh, I can do it. Are they on?
I'm right here.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, everybody, for being so patient and well, I'll have to wing it now, because now I can't read my notes. All right, right. So as I was trying to explain as we were waiting to get things set up, this little carriage house was attached to what is the Homestead Restaurant. It was the carriage house, or held the horses in the barn. So it was converted into a house in about 1907, put on a foundation, moved to its current setting, and it was a house from about 1907 until about 1994, with the exception of that short period, maybe a year plus, as an antique shop, Roses. So then it became a house again, and the last gentleman that owned it actually was responsible for calling the Historical Society and getting it started to be a museum. Can you,
I'm just trying to see it.
oh,
See it.
bottom right?
can't see it.
Okay, well, let's get a phone and a flashlight.
And she needs a light.
No.
She got it.
Can we use that one?
I got it. Got it.
Okay, all right. Okay, so the address,
Hey!
ta-da! So the address now is 3003 61st Avenue. This is from the 1930s, and it's,
Don't worry, I understand.
and you can see
Sit right here.
that, well, you can't really tell, but the house, the entrance is right there, kind of on the left,
Yeah.
and the steps. And the address was 6100 Southwest Stevens, which actually makes sense because the entrance faces Stevens Street.
Said in 1940, that tree wasn't even near there.
Oh no, this is about 1930.
They-
And no, it was way before.
Yeah.
But the old garage is there. You
Yeah.
can see it just off to the left before the house next door.
Oh,
And the big wraparound porch. Yeah, there's not a lot of plantings. It looks pretty sparse. But 61st is along this side. And this would be the west side. And I don't know why yet, but that's a question I'm going to ask the archivist at King County, Greg Lane, because he would be able to tell us. Why did they make that switch to make the address 3003 61st, when in fact the entrance was actually on Stevens? So that's another story.
Moving on.
Yes, please. So this is my mother, Maxine, the one that came from Oklahoma with her mother back in the 1940s, when she was still in high school. And as I said, she loved Alki because that's where they had an apartment first. And she absolutely loved this house and was thrilled to, and she just had pride in everything. The windows, as you can see above to the left, are little tiny window panes.
Yeah.
And they used to clean, who remembers glass wax? The pink stuff you put on the windows? So, little tiny window panes, you paint it on, then if you let it dry too much, it's a whole lot of work getting it off. But she did, because that's what we had and that's what we did. Oh, can you go back one more still? No, yeah, just to my mom. So it's a little hard to tell, but the big fireplace is still there. The only difference is, it was all brick, but in 1965, there was the earthquake
Yeah.
here in Seattle, and I happened to be playing hooky from school, so I was home. And my younger brother, at that time, was playing off to the right of, left of the fireplace there, and the house started shaking, kind of like an orange crate, it just went, and the bricks were falling from up above. So, when it all settled, of course, my folks and lots of other people had to get loans, in fact, to get repairs done. So they did, and when they repaired the fireplace, they didn't use brick on the upper section, they used firewall. And that allowed my mother, I mean, I don't know whether they could have done it with brick, but it allowed her to get a cupboard, a recessed cupboard put in on the right side of the fireplace, so that she could put her good dishes in there for the holidays, because the dining table was right next to that. How many of you are going on the tour tomorrow? Coming to the museum? One person? Two people?
What, in the space?
There's a bus ride to see the museum, to come to the museum tomorrow? Yeah, so it would take people to come on down to the museum, and if you're there, I'll be there as well. I think the tour is at 11?
I believe so.
Yeah, and I'll be there and I can answer any other questions. So I hope, more of you can.
Yeah, I'm going, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that'd be great. All right. So you'll see these things and how they are right now.
Right.
So this was the dining room table right next to the fireplace, and that's one of the windows that faces the south side. And my mother was very pleased to be able to put her dishes in and out of that little cupboard right there. That was new. This is the kitchen. Of course, it's not a kitchen anymore, it's a little gallery. There's two galleries in the museum. The larger one when you first come in, where my mother was standing, and the smaller one, which used to be the kitchen. So this is my family, it's my mother, and almost everyone, she's got a cigarette in her hand.
That glass milk bottles.
Yeah, look at that.
That's a good bag on you.
Yeah, and some kind of Ritz crackers.
Is that it, you
Yeah.
in the left there?
It is, the little person, that's my
That's right.
dad, right there in the front here on the left. That's me peeking around. That's my older sister Gail in the dark hair in the black sweater, I think. And you can't see her too well, but my grandmother, my mother's mother, is seated in between the two of them. So those beautiful birch cabinets, my mother just loved those as well. And in the earthquake, in the process of all that shaking, everything came out of those cupboards. It was a huge mess. Dishes and condiments and everything was broken. Except, and I don't have a picture of it here, but on the one wall, where in the gallery, you actually come into the kitchen now, I mean into the gallery, there's an opening that used to be the sink, and the heat vent, there was a gas heater, and the heat vent went to the upstairs, and that particular cupboard, it would stick on the vent. It was a round vent, and the cupboard, you had to give it a big tug. Well, because of that, those dishes were saved. They didn't fall out and break. But everything else was on the floor, a big fat mess. So, my older sister Gail got married. She had her rehearsal dinner at the homestead on a Friday night. And we would have eaten steak, except our family was Catholic, so we ate fish. In the banquet room, which is no longer. It hasn't had a banquet room in the homestead for many, many years. But all of the preparation and things for the wedding, which took place up at Holy Rosary Parish, were here. And those are my sister Gail seated with her maid of honor, Diane, behind her, and her two bridesmaids. And that's the stairway going up to the, what were 4 bedrooms upstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was 1962 that my sister got married, the same year as the World's Fair. The following year, my mother said, who was almost 40, how would you kids like to have a new brother or sister? And we said, wow, really? So yes, my mother was pregnant. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, my older sister said, I'm pregnant. So here are the 2 new mothers with their babies. So my uncle, or my younger brother, and his nephew are just 19 days apart. And that's been a fun story all of these years. There I am holding that baby brother. This is in the yard, and this is the south, what would be the southeast corner of the house. Looks like it needed painting, some peeling paint. This is that Christmas of 1963, and although we all 6 of us didn't live in the house together, this was one time to get a nice family photo. And you can see both sets of windows. And on the right side, through the window, you can see what used to be the apartment building that was across the street for many, many years. It looked sort of Dutch colonial.
What was that?
That was the photograph that fell over.
Gee.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That particular apartment building was there, and several of my friends actually kind of came and went from there, lived there and moved. But it was raised in 1989, and the newer apartment buildings still exist there today. This is my little brother Chris again. He's about a year, not quite 2. Yes, that's our sweet little dog Tina. She was half dachshund and half beagle, and just the sweetest dog, and they were inseparable. Sadly, I have to report that we came back from a really nice camping trip on Labor Day weekend in 1966, and somebody left the fence open and she was hit and killed by a car. So that was a terrible ending to what was a nice weekend, and her little body is buried in the backyard underneath the birch tree that's now the native garden.
Yeah.
So, anyway, just another photo of the living area. That's my youngest and only niece, Kathy, with my father, Chuck, and his sister, his brother-in-law. This is my Uncle Wallace, who had married my dad's sister, but she had died already. This is a shot of the kitchen, the little gallery that you'll see tomorrow with the uncle, my little brother, and the 2 nephews and my niece. I think it's Thanksgiving, they've got turkey and mashed potatoes. Another shot of the kitchen with the kids, just showing those beautiful cabinets. And this is in the backyard, and this is a native garden at this point. But this was about 65, and those little above ground pools were very popular. And even though the beach was only a block away, it was pretty fun just to dunk in and out of the fresh water, so the kids really liked that. This shot is showing that the cellar, there was a cellar underneath the house, and the entrance was about midway
Yeah.
on the south side wall, so it was, access from the outside in the yard, the backyard. And in that, it was a little bit more than a crawl space, because you could easily stand up in it.
Yeah.
But the furnace was there, and it was cool enough to store things like root vegetables and
Yeah.
eggs and some canned goods and canning things. My dad, for a time, made some beer. It was terrible, but I'm not a beer drinker, so I don't know. This, oops, that's okay. It's in the restoration when they, when they converted the building into a museum, they closed that off and they made the basement exit entrance on the far west side. With concrete steps and easier access. This is me. I had been in a car accident, so I have a cast on. But the significance for me is 2 things. One, on the porch, you can see the railings. They're different in the restoration. They don't have that flat plank on the top of the railings. It's rounded peeled poles, much like are the supports for those. But those were fun because if you had people over, you could sit on them and hang out and read and whatever. You could even stand on them when we put up holiday lights around Christmas. Then you just stood on one and kind of slid around the pole and kept going on around to get Christmas lights up. Very handy. And we also would sleep out on the porch sometimes in the summer in our sleeping bags. This was a kind of a fun thing to do. This was the backyard, and in one of the earlier photographs you could see a really old kind of garage, which was big and unmanageable really. So my dad tore it down, although he thought he could just take it down, hooking up his truck with a chain and pull it down. That thing was built to last a lifetime, literally. So he had to take it apart piece by piece. But they wanted a littler shop and a carport. So that's what they did. And my brother was getting a little bit bigger, and for safety for him and the other little kids and our little dog, he had built a fence in the backyard. These are some ladies I worked with. Who remember, you all know about the new nursing home on 47th and Admiral, across from Alki Mail. It's one of the Aegis buildings. Well, there used to be a nursing home there, and in 1968 it was called Modern Care on 47th and Admiral. And I worked there in the summer, and then I worked there part-time until 1970. And these were 3 of my friends that I made from working there. It later got sold and renamed Modern Care, and then sometime later, long after I moved, I think it turned into a Life Care.
Correct.
Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Okay.
It was Life Care of Berrien.
Ah,
West Seattle.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes.
So it was a 2-story building, and I have to say, it was a good experience for me, because then I became a nurse and that was my career. But I started when I was about 16, and it was a good thing to do. So, as I said, lots of different families lived in that house, and Gary, I'm going to say Fuller, had lived there about 16 years, and he was an antique dealer. He had, if you'd ever driven by there, he had antique cars, he had all kinds of milk cans, all kinds of stuff, decorating the porch and the yard area. And he had a big 6-foot-tall fence, so it was a little hard to see into the backyard by then. But when he was ready to leave and sell, he had already seen so many of the little houses around Alki get torn down and replaced with multiplexes, apartments, condos, and he didn't want to see that building torn down. So he contacted this Southwest Seattle Historical Society, which had only formed really in about 1984. And this was just about the same time. And, or excuse me, this was about 10 years later. 84 is when the Historical Society was formed, and 94 is when Gary, or 93, 94, contacted them to see if they could help do something. And they absolutely jumped at the chance to do that. They set about having membership meetings, and they talked to the community, and they raised the money, $200,000, to buy the building, and then set about really taking on the task of getting the building landmarked. They talked with Doris Nelson about landmarking the homestead as well, and because she was in agreement, that was a really neat package deal. A woman named Flo Lenz, who worked for King County many, many years, wrote the proposal for the buildings to be landmarked. And so it came to fruition, and they set about then raising nearly another $1 million to restore and convert the building into what's now our beautiful log house museum. So this shows the south side wall. During the time we lived there, in one of the photos you could see the peeling paint, and that was a constant. You know, a building that's built in 1904 probably shouldn't have been painted anyway, but it was, rather than it should have been stained.
Yeah.
So lots of things were happening, and the south side always gets the weather. So
Yeah.
the logs of that side had really gotten damaged from the weather.
Yeah.
And my father had passed away in 1970, but shortly after that, my mother looked for some contractors who could do some repair. What do you do with, you know, a log cabin building? It's not easy, like, you know, like a Lincoln log kit. You gotta have some pretty heavy equipment. So what the contractors told her was that they weren't working on log cabins. Anyone wasn't really doing that work yet. Probably somewhere there was
Yeah.
somebody, but not in the area. So what they offered her and what she did was to have those logs treated so that the pests would be killed off and what wood was there would be preserved. And then the area was all covered in cedar siding. So it certainly looked different. 3 sides of the house, you know, you could see all of the logs, and then the south side had cedar siding. And in the process of restoration, all of that siding had to come off. There's my friend Florabelle. Hi, Florabelle. Welcome.
There's a spot right here.
Yeah. So these are gentlemen volunteering from the Kiwanis Club, and they came down and volunteered their time and energy and took all that cedar siding off. So that then the gentleman who was located, and we're talking, these are 1995, 96, David Rogers, and he looks exactly like a lumberjack man, because that's what he does, came and headed up the project to replace all of those logs. And if you go tomorrow to the museum, there's about a 10-minute film that's really nice to see, because it shows them taking off the logs, how they actually work on the logs, the new ones, and how everything fits back together, so how they repair this. And there it is, the beautiful Log House Museum, birthplace of Seattle. The public is open, on the first floor is open to the public. The second floor is used as offices for the staff and volunteers and meeting. There is handicapped access, a ramp on the other side.
Yeah.
You know, when they designed the restoration and conversions, they had to decide exactly what could they do or what could they not do now to a landmark building to keep it intact and not, in other words, they wouldn't have an elevator inside, because there weren't
When
elevators.
they did the reconstruction, did they find a lot of old models in the basement of the house? Or?
No,
Oh,
not
gosh.
really, no. Actually, when we lived there, every once in a while, we digging around, because my mother did like to garden. One time she found a bracelet that looked like it
Yeah.
came from somewhere in Southeast Asia and
Yeah. Okay.
different rocks, but nothing Nothing really hugely
Because
significant.
I was there when they demoed 3 old houses for El Capiz Properties. And I got into the basement and I opened up this door. I found 8 crates full of 1858 Masons,
Oh,
some Crocs.
wow.
I still got a couple of them. I'm like,
Oh.
couldn't believe it.
Wow,
Some of the labels are really perfect condition on the Crocs.
that was a lucky find.
Couldn't believe that. That was just,
Yeah. So this is it. The museum, the restoration started in 1996, and there was a dedication and a blessing done by the Duwamish descendant of Chief Self, James Rasmussen. And then the work started, and they finished putting the landscaping in on November 13th in the daytime, the day it opened. I mean, it was down to the wire. It took a full
Really?
year to do this entire,
so what vine maple were put in back then. Vine maple that there now. Those maple.
maybe, yeah. When we lived there, the porch, in one of the pictures that showed my mom and sister with the 2 babies,
Yeah.
there were cement steps there. And I'm not sure why they took those out, but these are wooden steps.
Yeah, right.
It's a little bit higher off the ground than it used to be.
Yeah.
And the railings are different, so you can't sit on those poles anymore, and you can't stand up on them, so.
I bet it's been a fun house duck at Christmas time.
It was beautiful, it was really fun. And the two sets of windows that you can see,
Yeah.
on this left side, there's another pair on what would be the east side, and that was the master bedroom, quite a large room.
Yeah.
And that was my parents' room, and they use that as the master workroom now, so tables and computers and all that kind of stuff. The 2 littler windows, the one on the far right was the bathroom, and the big tub came right up to the edge of the window, and it was quite a large bathroom. And then the little one was a little tiny room that was delegated to my older brother Rick, because he didn't need a big room. And then 2 other bedrooms are on the other side. One is, they're both offices. One is for archives, where the staff, the curators, and the volunteers bring in things that are donated. They wear gloves to make sure that things are not damaged by their oils on their skin. So that room is pretty much off limits to people. You can peek in, but pretty much stay out. And the other bedroom on the other side, that was my sister's room, when we first moved there, is the director's office and her staff office. It was above the kitchen, which is now the little gallery. And my sister, being a teenager in the late 50s and early 60s, I think she graduated in 61. Anybody else graduated in 61? Anywhere around there? Okay.
58.
Ah, okay, close. Well, yeah, and the songs that were popular at the time were like Louie Louie and a few others. And she'd play it. She bought herself, she'd gotten a job at Pay and Save, and so she was paying for stuff, and she got herself a hi-fi. It wasn't a stereo, but it was a hi-fi.
Yeah.
And she played those songs over and over. Oh, Blue Moon was the other one. And my dad would get really irritated, and he'd take a broom handle and pound it on the ceiling from the kitchen. Turn that stuff down. Yeah. Anyway, and then now this is the newly restored, beautiful homestead,
Yeah.
which is I don't know if it's called sub-dan, I don't know what the proper terminology is, but the restaurant is named Il Nido. It's the Nest, with delicious Italian food and very good service, and there is a little wheelchair or walker ramp.
That
And
chimney looks new, that chimney
I think
above the roof.
it is, yeah. And the other bigger fireplace inside the homestead, which was kind of its signature thing,
Yeah.
had to be taken apart and put back together. So it looks a little different than it did originally, but they tried as best they could.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I used to have 2 big bush trees that died, and some deodorants in front.
They were beautiful. Doris Nelson, the previous longtime owner, loved rhododendrons, so those beautiful rhododendrons
Yeah.
died for lack of care and water.
Yeah.
So if you get a chance, thank you. well, this is not the one I fixed, there's a typo. I hope many of you are able to take the tour tomorrow. So, any other questions?
Would your mother really canning? She can't do home
She
cooking?
did.
She probably had jars back to the century probably. The
Maybe.
curly colonies, the bald.
Oh, I couldn't tell you, but pretty much she did pickles and beets and lots of jams and
She probably
jellies
did
and
Jack
cherries.
Downs, quartz.
Quartz mostly, quartz and
Quartz,
pines.
okay.
And it's not shown there, and it's not there now, but on the, what is this, the west side of the kitchen,
Yeah.
the door is different now, where the door is placed, but there was a kind of an add-on. It wasn't long, it was an add-on little porch where the washer and dryer were,
Yeah.
and in the window that you can't really see in the kitchen here, was an indentation, because it had been a windowsill, but it had shelves on it, so that's where she kept her canned goods. But
Okay.
again, in 1965 with the
It was
earthquake, all of those canned goods, beets and pickles and cherries and peaches and pears and everything crashed down. And I just remember my dad getting a great big garbage can and a shovel and just shoveling everything in
Yeah.
to the garbage
What a
can.
mess, what a
It was a
mess.
huge mess, yeah. But, you know, they got it repaired, got some new paint and got some new wallpaper.
Yeah.
My mother loved
Well, the
wallpaper.
house survived, just the chimney took a hit, I'm sure.
Actually, the chimney was okay, just in the top part of the fireplace. It was interesting, but all of the walls in the living areas, except for where the plate rail is, and I don't know whether I really pointed out the plate rail, but from the plate rail above, you can see the logs in the kitchen and the living dining area. And it really just, the contractor said, well, this building wasn't gonna come down, it just shook like an orange crate. You know, it's like Lincoln logs, they just,
Right, it was
you
built
know,
like-
all four corners, and they just shook, and that was that.
Yeah.
However, when they did the reconstruction and restoration, they discovered that the main floor was not secured to the foundation in any way.
Oh, wow.
And the second floor was not really secured to the first floor. So how that happened, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Because, of course, bringing things up to earthquake code, they had to do a lot of different
right.
fixes to make sure that nothing like that ever happened
Yeah.
again. And we've had a couple of earthquakes since, like 2001.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of places inside, like in the ceiling in the little gallery, where there were some cracks made. So a little bit of damage. And
Considering the wood in that house is over 100 years old now. Some division logs are over 100 years
well,
old.
they were probably about 200 years old when they were used to build the
Yeah,
building.
right,
So
yeah.
they're, yes, they're very
Way pretty
ancient.
old.
I'll put in a plug for one of our other board members on the Historical Society, Ken Workman,
Yeah.
who is the fourth generation descendant from Chief Sell. Gives an absolutely wonderful and absolutely fascinating discussion about trees and the ancestors. The Duwamish and the Salish and the Snowish,
Yeah.
all of the tribes.
Well, I always wanted to know what the forest was like before we came here. Because I don't think we had trees 6 feet bamboo down in that beach area, because the soil was so sandy.
I'm not sure.
I
I'm
don't
not sure
know,
there's a
I
big,
don't know how big trees actually, with age, how big they are, should I, maybe 3 feet thick, maybe?
oh, yeah, maybe even
Well,
4.
3 feet, here pushing 4,
Do you,
but I don't think they were 200 feet tall. I think
what
they were
about,
just,
yeah, Lincoln Park, and I know Schmitz Park is one of our
Yeah.
older, old growth areas.
I've been over in the parks up above Alki, that
Schmitz Park,
There are all some firs that are 8 feet thick,
wow.
and they're pretty bad with, but they're still standing.
I went to Madison Junior High, and so to get home,
Yeah.
the fastest way was just go out the lower level door, run down the street and into the park and zip home,
Right,
and it
yeah.
puts you out right by Alki Elementary. And,
There was some, But that's another good, we got some trees and they can work that are pushing 5 or 6 feet now.
Mhm.
They're a second growth, a mature second growth.
Ah,
Some are getting pretty big down in the, on on the bank.
yeah.
And they're getting big, they're getting up to it.
So who grew up in this area?
I grew up here.
You can,
Yeah.
great, okay, awesome. And lifelong?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. What neighborhood did you grow up in?
North Admiral.
North Admiral?
I was down by, my grade school was Jefferson, so where the Jefferson Square is.
Oh, okay,
I grew up in Fauntleroy.
okay. And Floraville?
Fauntleroy.
Fauntleroy, okay.
Well, the house I live in now, we lived there 2 weeks when the '65 earthquake hit. And we're still there. so,
Oh,
Yeah,
well, that's good.
but every chimney, we're just straight up from here. It was, our address is 3017. We have Stevens Street on one end and Hanford on the other.
Okay.
But yeah, the neighbor's chimney was in front of our back door. We couldn't go in
Oh,
around.
my.
Yeah, because you're right on the fault, you know,
Yeah.
up from Soto.
Yeah.
Straight up. But
Wow.
we're still there.
We
Well-
all live in Fauntleroy, don't we?
Yeah, no kidding. Well, and that's part of what the Southwest Seattle Historical Society is all about. And that's collecting people's stories.
Well, and the
So,
earthquake before that, I think it was 49, when the Lafayette School was, luckily it was during the spring break, because there were no kids there, because it was,
Oh, can you
Yeah,
imagine
after
the kids there, how bad that would have been,
Yeah.
had the kid been there?
yeah,
wow.
it went to Lafayette,
That'd
yeah.
be good. Anybody else have questions?
Is this the same as Alki Homestead?
It's, the museum is not the homestead, but it's a half a block away. It's a separate building.
A separate building? Well, it's similar, isn't it?
It looks just like it, only it's smaller.
Well,
Because,
kind of look familiar to me.
absolutely.
I don't live very far from,
The mayor's-
and 61st and Steve, I live in Musty House, but
Mhm.
I had my senior dinner at Alki Homestead.
Nice,
Money making.
that's nice.
Yeah, at the time, but I think they're restoring that.
It's open. It opened in May. The restoration finished. Yeah,
So
must have come late.
it's in the same area
It didn't
as
move.
that?
Yes, it's one half block up the street is the museum.
Because I thought maybe this was,
Wasn't it the carriage house?
It was the carriage house.
well, it's just that it looked a little familiar to Alki Homestead.
Yeah. So the homestead used to be called, when it was first built, Fur Lodge on the estate. The Bernard family built the estate. They had several outbuildings, but the carriage house, looked just like the main house, but it was smaller.
Yeah.
And when they sold it, they moved it, when they sold all the property, they moved the little carriage house to where it is now and converted it to a home. They put it on
It
the
had a
foundation.
fire, I know that much, but
It did,
we are supposed to be reopening or,
it did in May.
and when?
In May, it opened. It's been open now since, oh gosh,
Not very long.
toward the end of May.
Yeah.
And I think they used to serve chicken, but,
I don't think they even have a chicken on the menu.
well,
They've got
I
other
think,
wonderful things.
I think it's Italian.
It's Italian, and
That's a good tell you.
yeah, it's Italian. We've been there to eat, Floraville's been there to eat. Anyone else been there yet?
No, I didn't even know it was open yet.
Well, if you like Italian, I would suggest that you think about,
I definitely want to check the bar out though.
what's that?
I like, definitely want to check the bar out.
Oh,
Maybe the
Why
one
not?
Nice bar.
though.
yeah.
I just thought I asked because I looked familiar to me.
Exactly, and that's why, and it's a landmarked building, both of them are landmarked, so they won't be looking any different ever unless something really changes, but it
We
would
were
take a
lucky
lot.
that you guys saved that building when you did.
Well, yeah, it's
It's just-
historical, what do you call it?
It's part of our heritage.
Yeah, they stuff is in, they saved the Animal Theater as well, so
That's right.
maybe store down.
And most recently, the two buildings up in the junction, the Campbell and the Ham buildings are both landmarked now.
So they
So,
can't do, that's great.
Yeah.
so I just thought, I'm sitting here, like,
So if you haven't been members and you want to become a member of the
I
Southwest
think
Seattle
I'm
Historical
gonna go.
Society, we'd love to have you do that. It's a really wonderful thing to help support our community and preserve this heritage that if we don't preserve it, like you just said, it gets torn down.
Yeah,
So,
well, land value is so bad now that,
okay.
you know, if you have to be saved by now, it's not really a good thing.
yeah. Yep, there's got to be efforts to do that. And we're trying also to get younger people involved again. Obviously, all of us are aging, and at some point, we won't be here, but other people will. So to carry on all the traditions and continue to advocate for
Can flip the switch, I guess. They need to see to
keeping
get
the
out.
stories.
Yeah.
Keeping the stories, that's what's important.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for coming, I appreciate Thank you. And I hope you do, if you haven't signed up to come, I hope you think about coming down to the museum tomorrow. There are two exhibits. One is about the fire stations all along the Duwamish Peninsula.
Neat exhibit.
Yeah, it's called Fired Up. And so there's a lot of artifacts, old things from fire departments and stories of the different stations. And then in the smaller gallery, there's an exhibit about the music that's been made in the Duwamish area, Peninsula area, and the greater Seattle. But a lot of these little bands actually practice in people's basements and garages here in West Seattle.
Yeah,
So,
that's how, sound
Okay.
yeah, exactly.
You need help?
Yeah, mud honey and
Do you need a little help?